Okay, so tonight is the first talk in our new topic. It's called Love, actually. And so what we'll be looking at is love, actually. So looking at all the different aspects of it, from dating to sexy times to marriage to other things. Not in that order and not in, well, any order. But it's fine, don't worry. So yeah, kind of looking at it, but the actual bit is like actually properly getting into it and trying to get some answers out of things, looking at our real life experience and seeing, yeah, what we can figure out from it all. Generally, this was a topic that we've all kind of been wanting to cover for a while, like get rid of some of the fluffy stuff and get something proper, hardcore, which is a strange word to say before sex. So, let's talk about sex, shall we? Because kind of all the other topics kind of either build up to sex or trying to control yourself away from sex or other such things. So let's start with that. We'll start with God made us in His image. So we talk. It says it in the Bible. You know that. There we go. Genesis 1:27 to 28. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number." So He made us and He said, "Right, humans, excellent. Make more humans. I've built you a make a human factory. It's good. Use it." He made us to be in relationships. Genesis again. What's the blank page? 2:20 to 25. So yeah, generally at this point, Adam's been kicking around for a while. God's brought him every animal that He's made, which was quite a few. And Adam's gone, "It's nice. I'm going to call it a rhino, and I don't want to mate with it." And he goes, "That's nice. I'm going to call it a giraffe, but I don't want to make it." And he's worked his way through everything. And then he's gone, "No, none of these are good." And so then God said, "Alright," smacked him on the head, ripped a rib out and made Eve. Which is a little warning there, for be careful what you wish for. Then Adam says, in Genesis 2:20 to 25, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." So we're made to be in partnership, made men, made for women, and He's made us to partner up and to populate the earth with mini versions of ourselves. So sex is good. It's really good. And don't worry, there's no picture there. So it's just purely text up there. I thought that was the best option. And those did warn me that if I get too awkward, I can do the talk on divorce next week. So, so sex is a good thing. The Bible says that sex is a way for a husband and wife to express their love for one another. God's created sex to be a beautiful and enjoyable expression of love, but only between a man and a wife. So the first biblical note of sex is Genesis 4. It took 4 chapters to get around to it. Well, it took 4 chapters to write about it. They were apparently too busy up to that point. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. So Adam and Eve were married, but there's no similarity between their wedding and a modern Western wedding, or even any kind of legal arrangement. What God saw as the binding covenant between them was sex itself. That's what Adam and Eve had been up to for the couple of months or years or however long they were kicking around in Eden, while they were naked and unashamed of their nakedness. I mean, seriously, come on, wouldn't you? If we are to have God's attitude, Joe, behave yourself, the act of sex should therefore be as binding as marriage, and should be associated with lifelong commitment. In the Bible, there are no God-ordained wedding rituals, no rules on how the ceremony should be performed. The most sacred aspect of marriage isn't the ceremony, but sex itself. In good old Deuteronomy, which is excellent if you want to give a quote and no one will check it, because there's lots of stuff in there. It says that an unmarried man, this one is there though, don't worry. An unmarried man who seduces an unmarried girl is compelled by law to marry her. If there's doubt as to whether she consented, as in if there's a question that it may have been raped, then the woman has the right to refuse. However, because he initiated the sexual act, he loses all choice. He's bound to her through that single act of sex. The Bible doesn't have religious rituals around the couple's first sexual experience. But that would suggest that, if there was, that only if those rituals occurred, that it was a sexual union. It was binding, that it was kind of legal in God's eyes. Whereas it would seem that in God's eyes, only any act of sex is sacred and is making a lifelong vow. Even in today's society, a marriage can be annulled if you haven't had sex, showing that it's still considered as the basis of marriage. But the world asks us, how can you find out if you're sexually suited with someone if you don't try before you buy? If you never try the other sweets in the sweet shop, how do you know if you're not missing out on something? Or on the other hand, how do you know that you haven't picked the best sweet on your first go and all the rest are rubbish? Sex isn't about finding your best suited partner. It's about sharing your emotions, your feelings with your spouse. If you approach sex right, being open, talking and having fun, then you will suit each other. You have to be able to laugh with your partner, or you're doing it wrong. Or you'll be laughing because you're doing it wrong. But you don't, you're laughing. Sex is to be enjoyed. Verse 5, 18 to 19 says, "May you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman?" Starting up there, biblically saying boobs are awesome. So that's from God. And then it goes on to say, hey, I'm just preaching the word here. And then it goes on to say, don't mess with someone else's wife, which kind of makes sense. We get a warning here about adultery. Two things. First of all, it doesn't just apply to a man. It just so happens here he's talking to his son. But a woman can also go with someone else's husband, and that's bad too. And it doesn't just apply to husbands and wives, or to someone else's wife. For instance, as well, if you're married and you go with somebody who's not married, that's still bad too. There's no loopholes here, just because of the certain words, get the gist of the feeling. Okay, there we go. So yeah, anyone who isn't your partner is off limits, which is countercultural. There's a lot of talk these days about sex. Sex is everywhere. It's in the magazines, it's on the TV, even before the watershed doesn't seem to matter anymore. It's in our music. Most music is about sex these days, especially with Spice Girls, dirty little things. Our world has gotten lax about sex, and it makes it seem like premarital sex is okay, because it feels good. Then again, the Bible doesn't actually specifically forbid premarital sex. No, it doesn't say don't have sex before you're married. Because, as we've looked at, biblically there's no such thing. In the Bible's eyes, sex is marriage. One and the same thing. Paul wrote about the problems of being horny. Yeah, he did. In his letter to the Corinthians, who obviously had a problem with that too, it says, 1 Corinthians 7, 8 to 9. "I do, though, tell the unmarried and the widows that singleness might well be the best thing for them, as it has been for me. But if they can't manage their desires and emotions, they should by all means go ahead and get married. The difficulties of marriage are preferable far to the sexually tortured life as a single person." Now, Paul, as you might be able to pick up, is single and happy with it. He's celibate. Whether he's ever had a wife, we're not quite sure, but he seems okay with that one. But he does say that not everyone can just turn off their sexual drive. And in that case, it's better to get married instead. I do love this phrase in the end, though. The difficulties of marriage are better than being horny and single. On that note, Rachel will be talking about the difficulties of marriage later on. So it's worth noting that there is a big difference between sex drive and lust. Having sexual feelings is built into us. It's part of our DNA. It's natural, but it's what we do with them that counts. It's all good to fantasize about your partner, but not anyone else, which isn't easy. And this goes for those who are not married as well, except when you don't have a wife, who is it okay to point your sexual drive towards? The Bible tells us over and over that lust is bad, but it doesn't, as far as I've found, actually talk about masturbation. Yeah, I said it. In my opinion, and I'm happy to be corrected, if you can manage to keep your mind lust-free during it, and that is a whole other trick, then surely that's got to be a better option than popping around to your local prostitute. I don't know if there is one, I'm assuming there might be. 1 Corinthians 6:15-20 talks of the oldest profession. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never! Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. But whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body. But whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your own bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore, honour God with your bodies. So a man using a prostitute is biblically married to her. They have no plans for commitment to each other, but God has declared them as one. Likewise, if you've had sex with someone, it doesn't mean that you can carry on and have sex with anyone else that you want to. As with the prostitute, all customers become bound to her. Likewise, all of your sexual partners are bound to you. Now, just for the record, I'm not calling anyone a prostitute here. It's possibly a bad example. But you can't mess with sex and not get burned. Again, back in Proverbs, it says, a prostitute can be had for a loaf of bread. Shows inflation, eh? But another man's wife preys on your very life. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. In Deuteronomy, it states that a man or woman found not to be a virgin on their wedding night was to be stoned to death. Harsh but fair. And easier to... Alright, easier to check than the woman though, nonetheless. Now obviously, to do anything that would result in someone else's death is a grave offence. So for instance, sleeping with someone before marriage, thus causing them to be stoned to death on the wedding night. Bad times. The Old Testament laws apply to both genders here. For an example of the other direction, 10 Commandments say you shall not covet your neighbour's wife. So I was telling men to keep it in your hands. The Bible does not attempt an exhaustive list of every possible sexual rule. It expects us, under God's guidance, to appropriately apply the examples to different scenarios. There are no loopholes in the Bible. So, what about when you're engaged? Can you have sex when you're engaged? I mean, you're about to be married, right? Well, no. And trust me, that's hard. And it's just time. I mean, surely, it's just the fourth dimension, right? What difference does it make? But people who are engaged to be married usually expect in every fibre of their being to be bound to that person for the rest of their life. But sadly, some engaged couples discover it would be a tragic mistake to get married. So they break off their engagement. And this is seen really by everyone as, you know, it's sad but okay, and it's not as serious as getting a divorce. Which pretty much confirms that an engagement is not an acceptable time for sex. Sex is more binding in God's eyes than we regard an engagement. To have sex before you're publicly married, you wouldn't just be cheating on your partner, you'd be cheating on everyone who knows you. You'd be telling everyone that you're not married yet, but secretly you'd be acting as if you were. So why not have sex? Well, as we say back in Genesis, the point of sex is babies. There are a few other things in life that are as life-changing. Married couples that I know that have just had their first child still can't get their head around just how much their life has changed. All of a sudden they have no control over their time, over what happens. Pregnancy is always a risk with sex. All contraceptives are only about 99% effective. My parents were married with 2 children and were using 2 types of contraceptive. As the 3rd child, I'm evidence that that 1% sometimes happens. Oh, bless the 1%. Yeah, they told me that. If you have an unplanned pregnancy outside of marriage, there's no guarantee that you'll have the same view on how to proceed as the other potential parent. How would you cope as a single parent? So, STIs, sexually transmitted infections. Yeah. Again, the Bible is a general health guide. If you sleep around, you're likely to catch a lot of diseases. Deuteronomy lists lots of sexy things not to do. It then goes on and describes good hygiene rules for when you go to the toilet and things to do when preparing meat. Generally lists lots of ways not to get ill. So there we go. Just saying it, well, what am I trying to say there? I'm trying to say that it's just putting it in a general healthy living guide. Sleeping around is not a way to stay healthy. So STIs are nasty, they're not to be underestimated. Some result in horrible things for yourself, some cause infertility, some you can pass on to other people without knowing anything and make them infertile, which is something much worse than if you really think about it. And finally, emotions. To have sex with someone is to leave part of you with them. It's been described as gluing two sheets of paper together and then being unable to separate them again. You'll always feel some kind of emotional attachment, whether good or bad, to anyone that you've been intimate with. So I hear you crying. How far? How far can we go? Deliberately lusting corrupts you, but making another person lust, or turning them on, corrupts you both, because it makes you the tempter and a willing partner. So how far can a dating couple go? Heavy petting and dirty talk are like playing with dynamite, and what's safe for one person might not be safe for another. Just like fingerprints, each person's sexuality and vulnerabilities are unique. Other than the decision to become a Christian, it's hard to conceive of a decision that will shape your entire character and future as profoundly as your choice of marriage partner. By that choice, you're sentencing yourself and setting in concrete more things than our mind can cope with. Even your children's genetic makeup is at stake. To abandon careful thought and prolonged prayer and reduce your choice of marriage partner to a few minutes lack of self-control is one of the most irresponsible things you could do. Think, am I really going to spend the rest of my life with this person? But think about this before you're lying next to them with the lights off and fingers missing. If satisfying your lust is more urgent than your need to honour God by waiting until marriage, then it may be that God is not the God of your life. Whatever you've made your God, be it yourself, be it lust, be it something else, it's certainly not God. It's been said that uncommitted sex is like an uncommitted leap off a cliff. Once you jump, you're committed. And the consequence is going to happen whether you like it or not. It's not how close can you get to the cliff edge, but it's how safe can you keep yourself by keeping away from that cliff edge. And how close do you want to get to the edge when you know that you've got really wobbly legs and you know that your partner likes to jump off things? A classic rule I've heard is, if you don't have it, don't touch it. But generally what do you say from that? Sex is too far. Holding hands is probably okay. Okay, let's get nitty and gritty and such like. Intercourse is only part of sex. Sex itself is really anything that turns you or yourself on. There's nothing in the Bible that gives concrete lists as to what counts as hanging out, what counts as dirty stuff, and then what counts as full-on sex. The Bible doesn't really spell it out at all. But if you wander into any good adult bookstore, pick yourself up a How to Have Good Sex book, you'll find there'll be lots of chapters on lots of different dirty things, and then one chapter on like penetrative intercourse. And it's a book on sex, thus I think you'll find it's all sex. If you're turning the other person on, you're probably having sex. Personally, I've spent many a night when I was in a constant battle between my head and my heart. Think about what you'll think of yourself in the morning. I think you know in your heart when far enough is far enough. In the heat of the moment though, it's really easy to forget why you've decided to stop at a certain point. It's so easy just to go just a little bit further and cross your own boundary. However, if you know your partner's boundaries, then it's a lot harder to break them. If you really love them, and to be honest, if you don't, what are you doing? Then you won't make them do things that you know they don't want to do. Many times I've been saved by just that. Decide your limits with your partner when you aren't horny. It's not a good time to do it when you're already in the act. Do it somewhere where nothing can happen. Chatting about these sort of things can be the start of one thing leads to another. So get yourself in a corner of a nice well-lit family cafe or somewhere in public. Unless you're one of those people. Not when...
Yeah, we've had them in here.
It was a one-time thing.
Yeah, don't discuss this when lying down in a sexually candlelit room. So what if you've already had sex? Well, everyone falls to sin in some way or another. If your area happens to be sex, there's still hope. While you can't physically become a virgin again, you can obtain God's forgiveness. You just have to ask for it and try not to sin that way again. What truly angers God is willful sin. When you know you're sinning and just keep on participating in that sin. And that goes for all things, not just sex. While giving up sex may be difficult, God calls us to remain sexually pure until marriage. In Acts 13 it says, "Therefore, my friends, I want you to know that through Jesus the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through him, everyone who believes is set free from every sin." So the punishment, the trouble, the pain of sins has been taken away from us through Jesus. So if you ask for that, then you can wipe your slate clean and start again. But sex is tempting. As a Christian, though, we fight off temptation every day. Being tempted is not the sin, but giving in to temptation is. So how do you fight it off? Well, the desire is really strong, especially if you've already had sex. And it's only by relying on God for strength that you can really fight it off. And even in the first place, avoid getting into those tempting situations. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. "No temptation has seized you except what is common to man. And God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you're tempted, He will also provide a way out so you can stand up under it." So it's saying, no matter what temptation you got, God knows that you can resist it. You just need to know that yourself that you can. Danny will be carrying up on temptation in the future, so listen up for more on that. So, sex is awesome in the original use of the word. And that's how God intended it to be. But it belongs in its rightful place, between a man and his wife. Hold out for the much more enjoyable, guilt-free version.